Hi, I'm Dave Palmer, and thank you for joining me on this video on Aquinas for Everyone, where we try to teach basic principles of Thomistic philosophy to basically everybody. And in this particular video, we're going to take on the issue of Pride Month, because June has pretty much been taken over by Pride Month, and you see some of the images that I have on the screen with me. Love is love, and time for tolerance. You see the rainbow flag everywhere. It only seems to become more prevalent from year to year. So it's pretty much dominating the month of June. So we ask the question, if St. Thomas Aquinas was alive, or if there was Pride Month back in the 13th century when St. Thomas Aquinas lived, what would his response be to Pride Month? And I'm trying to take a very kind of balanced approach to this and not overreact, because I generally don't like Pride Month, I'll be honest with you. But what would St. Thomas Aquinas say? Well, first of all, I think we have to recognize that there is a pride that is good. Okay, we are proud of our children. We're proud of our achievements that happen at work. You know, we get a big sale, or our team does well, or maybe something in sports, like your coach is very proud of you and you achieved a black belt or something like that. That's a good kind of pride. Now, I will say that in the Summa Theologica, St. Thomas Aquinas never spoke about that kind of pride, okay, that kind of feel good about yourself and you're proud. I think that's a more recent invention, and not to say there's no merit to it. I mean, we should be proud of ourselves, we should be proud of our kids, but the word pride itself, I think, has generally had a negative connotation traditionally, especially with St. Thomas Aquinas, because it's, of course, connected with one of the 7 deadly sins. So let's talk about pride as a sin. Now, interestingly, where does St. Thomas Aquinas talk about pride as one of the deadly sins? It's in the Secunda Secundae, the second part of the Summa, where he basically goes through the theological virtues, and then he goes through the cardinal virtues. When he gets to temperance, it's in the virtue of temperance, that cardinal virtue, that the sin of pride is opposed to the virtue of temperance. Many people think it would be justice or maybe fortitude, but it's actually in temperance. So he asks here, is pride a sin? Now, of course, we know it's one of the deadly sins, but what exactly does that mean? He says pride, or soberbia in Latin, is so called because a man thereby aims higher than he is, whereby Isidore says a man is said to be proud because he wishes to appear above what he really is. For he who wishes to overstep beyond what he is proud. Now, right reason requires that every man's will should tend to that which is proportionate to him. Therefore, it is evident that pride denotes something opposed to right reason. Now, the eternal law is divine reason. Okay, that's basically the law of the universe. So we have to conform to that, or else we're opposed to the law of the universe, which is God's reason, right? And it shows it to have a character of sin, because according to Dionysius, the soul's evil is to be opposed to reason. Therefore, it is evident that pride is a sin. Okay, so that's how our feeling of pride, even if it's good or benign in the sense of being just proud of an achievement, this is where it can step into the area of sin. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And he says, is it a special sin? Thomas also often talks in the Summa about special sins. And it often means that there's a relationship between this sin and other sins. And that's what he's going to talk about here, because he says the sin of pride may be considered in 2 ways. First, with regard to its proper species, which it has under the aspect of its proper object. In this way, pride is a special sin because it has a special object, for it is an inordinate desire of one's own excellence. Okay, there's a certain kind of narcissism that's involved in pride, where one is very consumed about their own excellence. Secondly, it may be considered as having a certain influence towards other sins. In this way, it has somewhat of a generic character, in as much as all sins may arise from pride. Okay, that's something we have to take into mind. Okay, if you're out celebrating pride, and are you, is there a disorder in your relationship with God? Well, only you know that, but does it lead to an acceptance of other sins? And of course, only you know that as well. In this way, it has somewhat of a generic character, inasmuch as all sins may arise from pride in two ways. First, directly, through other sins being directed to the end of pride, which is one's own excellence, to which may be directed anything that is inordinately desired. Now, in our culture, we are taught to esteem ourselves and be excellent and excel and achieve. That, in and of itself, is probably directing us towards pride. It's directing us towards one of the deadly sins. So we have to be careful. Secondly, indirectly and accidentally, as it were, that is, by removing an obstacle, since pride makes a man despise the divine law, which hinders him from sinning. All right, so one of the, sins is that, or I guess laws of God, is that we have to be chaste. We have to, if we're married, we're chaste. If we're single, we're chaste. If we have same-sex attraction, we're called to chastity. It's different for every person, but, sex is only, permitted within a marriage that has been, deemed a marriage by the church. Okay, is pride a mortal sin? Now, this is where we really have to be careful, because if you're a Christian, you believe in hell. And if you're a Catholic, you believe that if one dies in a state of mortal sin, they go to hell. If you die in a state of grace, you go to heaven. You might have to spend some time in purgatory, but this is a big deal, because this is where you're going to spend eternity. This is a teaching of the church, right? So this is very important. Is pride a mortal sin? Thomas says, pride is opposed to humility. Now, humility properly regards the subjection of man to God as stated above. Hence, pride properly regards lack of this subjection insofar as a man raises himself above that which is appointed to him according to the divine rule or measure. Wherefore it is written in Scripture, the beginning of the pride of man is to fall off from God. Because, to wit, the root of pride is found to consist in man not being in some way subject to God in his rule. So, in Pride Month, are you subjecting yourself to the rule of God? That's an important question to ask. If you're going to pride rallies or you're, rainbow flags, are you saying, I want to totally conform this to the rule of God, conform this to the teachings of the church on morality, on chastity? Okay, that's an important question. Now, it is evident that not to be subject to God of its very nature is a mortal sin, for this consists in turning away from God, and consequently pride is of its genus a mortal sin. Nevertheless, just as in other sins which are mortal by their genus, for instance, fornication and adultery, there are certain motions that are venial by reason of their imperfection, through forestalling the judgment of reason and being without its consent, so too in the matter of pride, it happens that certain motions of pride are venial sins, when reason does not consent to them. All right, so somebody may be at a pride parade and they don't quite understand exactly what's going on, or they're still wanting to honor God. They're, whatever. I don't know what all the motivations are. So I don't think we can just absolutely judge somebody and say you're sinning because you're at one of these parades, or you're raising a rainbow flag. But at the same time, they need to be careful, because this is a danger zone to a mortal sin of pride if you're not subjecting yourself to God and to the teachings of his holy church. Okay, finally, when it comes to pride, you've likely heard that this was the sin of the first parents. And so how exactly did that work? Was pride the first man's sin, Adam and Eve? Thomas says, now man was so appointed in the state of innocence that there was no rebellion of the flesh against the spirit. All right, there was integrity between reason and flesh with Adam and Eve before the sin. Wherefore, it was not possible for the first inordinateness in the human appetite to result from its coveting a sensible good, to which the concupiscence of the flesh tends against the order of reason. Okay, this is when we eat too much, or have sins of the flesh, or sex, or too much sleep, or whatever. Sins of the flesh is what he's talking about here. Adam and Eve didn't have to worry about that before the fall. Okay, it remains therefore that the first inordinateness of the human appetite resulted from his coveting inordinately some spiritual good. Now, he would not have coveted it inordinately by desiring it according to his measure as established by the divine rule. Hence it follows that man's first sin consisted in his coveting some spiritual good above his measure, and this pertains to pride. Therefore, it is evident that man's first sin was pride. So this is the proper disposition of a human being to God. Okay, we read God's word, we study God's laws, we follow the teachings of the church, and we're humbled by it. And we realize that He's God, we're not. And we need to subject ourselves to God and to rightful authority, right? Like within the church. So, what would Thomas say about this? What would Thomas say about Pride Month? I think he would say these are children of God. They are loved by God. They are made to the image and likeness of God. But going out and celebrating pride, if nothing else, you need to be careful, because if you're not subjecting yourself to God and His teachings, especially His moral teachings, and you are not putting yourself in a proper position in relation to God in all humility, you might be in a danger zone of mortal sin. And in that case, you need to be careful, because your eternal soul could be in peril. I think that's how Thomas would react to Pride Month as it is celebrated in America today. God bless you.